to fill in the gap when needed. So that the desire to have a good, healthy general fund reserve is also there, not only just for general fund services, but for any services in the county that require it in the future. It's for that unknown and that uncertainty. That's why counties are required to have a reserve. And we do very well here. It's just being mindful of that as we go through the budget process as well. A great thing in our budget this year, as Nick mentioned, was our $404 million operating budget, which is only 1.4%. That's a great testament to all the departments and the financial analysts and department directors out there. Because if you think of inflation being as high as it was, and we're only increasing it by 1.4%, that's good. Now there is a large chunk that was capital, right, and that affects it, but it's still overall it's a good position to be in. So while this is a one-year budget that we're looking at, the budget officer and the finance team, we continue to look at the long-term forecast. And that's also why that's included, as we mentioned, in your budget package as well, your notebooks. And there are two notebooks that you have. One is the program, high-level overview, provides all the information you need. And the second one is the line item budget. So we'll mostly concentrate on the high-level program budget today, but the line item is there if you want to get to it. Or you could do like me, I just included it in one binder, then you only have to carry one binder. So, that is your choice there. So while we do have a strong financial base, as I mentioned, the great things about Deschutes County, we are facing similar challenges in our future. As Nick highlighted, I was speaking with another county who they just happen to be facing a $23 million shortfall this year, right? And you might have seen that in the paper or the news. We're at a good place where as we look proactive on our long-term forecast, we have time to make decisions today that will affect this year's budget, next year's budget, and so on. So we're not at that drastic point, but as good financial stewards, we're just always mindful of that. And so thinking of that with our forecast, we're resilient. As a county, we've been through economic downturns or economic uncertainty before, and we can get through that again. So the role of the budget committee, as Nick mentioned, today this week on Thursday, you'll approve the budget. And then in June 21st, in fact, the final proposed budget approved budget will go before the Board of Commissioners, and the board will formally adopt the budget on June 21st. And with that, same thing. We have a great budget team here. So I want to thank Dan, budget and financial planning manager, who really he's the brains behind everything, right? He helps keep all of us in line, and Cam with support, providing her great insight as well with her experience. And yes, Laura as well. So it's a great team. It really is a pleasure to work with the team members, and working with county admin and the department heads. It really has been a great experience for me getting to this point. And I want to thank again the budget committee members for your time this week. I did watch the video session from last year, and Wayne had mentioned, him and his budget friends always say, how long was your budget committee members? And if you remember, he mentioned, yeah, some of them are like, well, it was 1 day or 2 days, or how many hours, it was 2 hours, and then he took pride in it was the week, so I mentioned that because it is a commitment, especially from the budget committee members, to dedicate all this time. And we truly appreciate all your efforts and insight into that. And of course, the board, who you're at it all the time. So we thank you for that. And with that, and if there's questions also.
Robert, are there, you mentioned that we have an AA1 rating.
Yes.
Okay. Do you have a feel for how many counties in Oregon also have an AA1 rating, or?
I don't have the exact number, but I can say it is, sometimes it's difficult to get to an AA1 rating. So that's why former county, we were pleased when we were able to reach that mark, because it took a lot of effort to get to that. And the items that really pushed us over the top was the cash reserves that we had. It was the fund balance. It was also having policies and sticking to it. And of course, the economy. I mean, there's multiple items that they look at when they look at your rating. And one of them is the local economy. How's that doing? And your ability to increase a tax, or, we all have permanent tax rates, all the counties here, right? But if there's other operating levies or other items that your community supports. So it's multifaceted, but it's a smaller number than a larger number.
Often do they update and review and update the rating?
Yeah, anytime you go out for a bond, definitely when you go out for a bond, you usually have to submit to a rating. And so you'll provide all your information, and that's an opportunity for the rating to be increased at that time. Additionally, they do reviews sporadically, and it could be annual, and they'll issue an update on that. They'll just do an overview of all the counties, or if something significant happens, then they may relook at it as well. For example, with the banking crisis, they relooked at all of the banking ratings, the financial institution ratings at that time, right, and issued an economic outlook on that. So, but definitely whenever you go out for a bond, they'll look at your rating then.
Are there any other questions for Nick or Robert? We're a little ahead of schedule. Does anyone have a opening thought or comment? Dan?
Sorry, Bruce, I was just gonna go over the
Oh, sorry.
Robert,
Okay,
the budget.
Go ahead.
assumptions. No, no worries. So thank you, Robert. Thank you, Nick. I'm over here deleting paragraphs because Nick's budget message was so comprehensive. Really good. So thank you both. I really want to thank the budget committee, also volunteers. Recognize that it takes a week of your time, and we just thank you for your expertise. It means a lot to the county and to the community. So I'm going to start off by going over some of the general assumptions that you're going to find out in the proposed budget here. And then I'm just going to go into a little bit more detail on what some of those budget decisions might be. And a lot of this will be covered, those budget decisions, tomorrow in our fiscal entities presentation, which we'll be doing on general fund and transient room tax or discretionary funds. But first off, to start with our assumptions, our personnel and COLA. As Nick kind of spoke to, the county continues to feel the effects of larger inflationary rates here for the last couple of years. The COLA this year was set at each bargaining unit's maximum amount. These inflationary factors combined with increased PERS rates and employee step increases contributed to a total personnel budget of around $169 million, which is approximately $9 million increase over fiscal year 23 or 6%. Page 37 in your budget binder has a breakdown of the personnel expenditure history year over year. Actually, per page, actually going to amend that. Yeah, it's on 39, excuse me. Page 39 will have that. Thank you, Commissioner Adair. And it's actually a great summary here that will also have debt, which we'll talk about a little bit, transfers out, beginning net working capital. Moving on is our health benefits and insurance rates. The county developed a forecast several years back to slowly spend down our health benefits reserve to ensure that rates were aligned with claims costs. However, the county has continued to experience unforeseen significant increases in claim costs over the past 2 years that have effectively spent down the fund balance much quicker than anticipated. And at this point, we're starting to think that those is kind of the new normal here, this claims rate. And due to these increased expenditures, the fiscal year 24 health benefits proposed budget includes an 11% increase in departmental charges for health insurance rates, as well as charges for vacant positions. With these rate increases, the health benefits fund has a beginning working capital of $5.7 million, which is approximately $10 million less than it was 2 years ago. With proposed contingency of $3.8 million, it may be below the optimal levels currently. And because of the lowered fund balance and decreased contingency, the health benefits fund will need to increase departmental health insurance rates in the future years as well. The health benefits fund can be found on page 178 of your binder.
Well, question. So you
Yeah.
mentioned charges for vacant positions. So did we drop that a few years ago, but now we're going to bring it back? Is that the idea? So that's that opportunity to capture that commitment for that position, but yeah, that's interesting. So that's in the budget now.
In the proposed budget currently. Yep. PERS rates. The last major driver of the personnel costs is the PERS rates. The PERS board issued new rates for the 23-25 biennium, which go into effect July 1st, 2024 for the county's fiscal year 24 budget. The new rates increased on average by 1.6%, which is estimated to have a $1.75 million impact on the fiscal year 2024 proposed budget. That's actually a lot less than we had forecasted. And so those rates were, we were happy to see those.
Dan, I hate to interrupt you, but
Mhm.
back to the health benefit fund.
Yeah.
It actually was much worse this last year than the year before. It really, what is it? It's $6 million
Mhm.
that took our fund away.
And
Yeah.
yeah, no, and I think that's something we're looking at, and Kathleen will speak more to this when we go over the kind of the human resources related funds. But yeah, it's definitely for the second year in a row, kind of a major talking point, and what we're going to do in the future to kind of make sure that those claims costs are adjusted with premiums is going to be important. So
It's just, we had 16 million sitting there for 18, 19, 20. And then COVID hit and people did not go to the doctor, and this is what we're seeing now.
Right.
Plus other things happening.
right, the increased cost of medical procedures, and of course, we're just starting to see this claims cost kind of stay around, really. And I don't think, obviously that's Kathleen's presentation, but I'm not going to get too much into it. But I think our consultants felt like it was maybe a 1-year hit, and now we're just kind of seeing it continue. So we really need to align our cost there with our rates.
Then on PERS, can you, so we did that PERS buy down a few years ago. Can you explain how that interacts with the rate increase that the PERS board did recently, and how that all results in a relatively modest increase for us?
Yeah, I'm actually not, I wasn't quite there when we did the PERS buy down. So I couldn't tell you exactly how that works. I know that we still have $4 million in our PERS reserve for potential buy down if we wanted to utilize those funds so that the departments took less of a hit. But I'm not sure if I could speak to how that happened and how that affected anything in fiscal year 23.
Yeah, just expanding on that a little bit. We have two different tools that we're using for the PERS rates, and one of them is the internal reserve that we have. In the proposed budget, we're not anticipating using any reserve funds this year. We're holding on to those internal reserves. Next year, or the next biennium, when they increase rates, we'll see if we need to use the internal reserve for that. When we contributed to the state Senate Bill 1049, or I think it was something, those funds with the 25% match, which was really excellent. What that does, it gives you an earnings credit, it gives you a credit towards your PERS rates. So they set our rates, then they applied that credit, and that's where we ended up. And that's where we end up with our new PERS rates from PERS. So they credit your rate what it would have been, and you have a lower rate because of that match.
So do other counties who did not make that investment are going to see a higher rate increase, or
They would, because those funding dollars, as I mentioned, reduce your percentage that you have to pay PERS.
thank you.
Yeah, it was a good investment.
Yeah, sounds like it.
There was matched dollars by the state also, so.
Exactly, that 25% match.
This one.
And they still have a list of other public agencies that are waiting to do the match, because there were limited funds for that.
Yes, we were at the top of the list, I think.
Yep.
All right, so revenue assumptions, this is going to go broadly over property taxes and TRT. Large revenue assumptions impacting the proposed budget revolve around property taxes and transient room tax. In many ways, property taxes are the backbone of our revenue funding streams. They are the major funding source of the county general fund, which in turn is the primary support of the assessor's office, the clerk's office, the Board of Property Tax Appeals, the district attorney, our tax department, our veterans department, property management, and our medical examiner. Additionally, other departments receive substantial general fund transfers for their operating costs, including community justice, health services, dog control, victims assistance, and the Board of County Commissioners. The proposed budget assumes the current property tax levy of $1.2183 per $1,000 of assessed value. However, the Budget Committee will consider a budget decision regarding levying the full permanent property tax rate, which would be an increase of 6 cents per $1,000 of assessed value for fiscal year 24. We project that would be approximately about $1.8 million total in additional property tax. The assessed value is projected to increase by 4.9% this year, and Nick spoke to this a little bit. That's lower, quite a bit lower than our approximate historical growth rate average of 5.5%. So that lower growth rate has impact on how much property tax collections we have here. The lower budgeted growth rate is due to rising inflation and high interest rates, which have decreased development and permitting volumes throughout the region. We anticipate the property tax collection rate to hold stable around 96%, which is consistent with years prior. Obviously, we worked with the assessor on a lot of these numbers and want to thank him for his contributions. The above factors give us a fiscal year 24 general fund projected property tax revenue of $35.6 million. That's without a property tax levy increase. And that's approximately $1.2 million more than budgeted in fiscal year 23. More details on assessed value and property taxes can be found in the budget message on page 8 and 9 of your binders. All right, moving on to transient room tax. That can be found on page 171 of your budget binder. The transient room tax, or TRT, from the tourism industry is another major revenue source in the proposed budget and is used to fund internal operations such as the sheriff's office, the fair and expo, health services, and justice court, while also funding debt service for the courthouse expansion. We are currently projecting TRT revenue for fiscal year 24 at $12.6 million, which is an approximate $500,000 decrease from the projected FY23 year over year kind of ending actuals, which we project to be around $13.1 million.
How does that compare to what we budgeted for FY23?
600,000, 500 to 600,000 higher than what we budgeted. And again, we were on track to be around that 13.5, 13.6 that we budgeted, but over this last quarter, we saw about 7 to 8% decline. But in April, I think the numbers came out around 31% decline. So, yeah. So we were hopeful that we'd have a little bit of growth this year, but really, you know, FY22 might be a larger year than this year by 100,000 or so.
Yeah.
In fiscal year 22, we budgeted about 12.5 million for TRT. And then in fiscal year 23, the current year, we budgeted about 13.5 million. And so we increased it by $1 million. However, we were probably a little too aggressive in that year, right? In the current year. And that's why will be under this year as well. So we are budgeting closer to the fiscal year 22 actuals numbers and closer to the fiscal year 22 budget.
Closer to FY22 actuals, but not at FY22 actuals.
Correct.
FY22 actuals probably will likely be the highest TRT year that we've seen up until this point. So we're really, we're looking at maybe having that last quarter, not the 31% drop, but the 7% drop, 5% drop-ish, maybe continuing into part of fiscal year 24. And that's why we've kind of conservatively budgeted it at around $12.6 million. Obviously, we'd like to see it come in much higher than that. But given the general trend, that's kind of what we're looking at.
And part of that is it's good to budget a little more conservatively because since we budgeted that 13.5 million this year and we made commitments, we will be and with the decreased revenue, we'll be starting fiscal year 24 in the negative with our commitments, right? So that's why you don't want to overestimate your revenues and make commitments on those overestimated dollars.
Yeah, no, I'm the reason I'm asking all these questions is I'm wondering if we're budgeting too optimistically, whether we even want to come down a little more.
Actually, talking to Sun River, which provides 73% of our room tax revenue, their numbers for the future look great. Not going back to 19 is what I have been told by a few people. So it is a different economy.
Yeah.
But their business numbers look really outstanding.
That's good to hear. And that's why we're keeping it at the fiscal year.
Conservative.
Yeah, the 22, we're looking at the 22. And as we heard from the VCO presentation the other day, they were a little optimistic as well, but then you never know it. So talk about uncertain economic, right? That's one of those. And Dan will mention it's hard to budget those numbers exactly because we don't have those crystal balls. It's not as consistent as like our property taxes where you can kind of look and see where we're at on that.
Then you look at how many concerts we're going to have here this summer. So surely that is going to bring in a lot of people to our community.
Although most of that will be in town.
Right, well, darn it. Well, maybe they're going to want to stay out of town.
And you
This
know,
is
what,
Sun River,
what-
we
and
like-
what we heard from Julia was that bookings are looking pretty solid. That doesn't. You know, she didn't know anything about what the rates are going to be like that people that lodging establishments are going to be charging. So
Yeah, at the time when we did the proposed budget, you know, we were seeing that 7% decline. We felt like 12.6 was pretty conservative. And then we saw the April numbers, and hopefully that's just because it's down season. And hopefully we do have a strong summer, but certainly we'll have to continue to assess it as we go forward. Because you're right, Commissioner Chang, you don't want to over budget any of your discretionary funds.
you know, I mean, we already over budgeted this year, and to over budget 2 years in a row would put us in a bad place.
And so I was just going to speak to the decrease in budgeted TRT is based upon declining year-over-year revenues in the last quarter of fiscal year 23. It should be noted that projecting TRT funds is a difficult task due to it being strongly correlated with the tourism industry, wildfires and smoke, changing short-term lodging demands, rates, national economic swings, and other factors can have a significant and unanticipated effect on the revenues. Speaking briefly to investment earnings, they're projected at $6 million, which is approximately $2 million higher than the projected fiscal year 23 actuals. The projected increase in investment earnings is due to just in general higher interest rates. Moving on to debt, expenditures to repay borrow funds are budgeted at $8.9 million for fiscal year 24. So 30.3% more than fiscal year 23. The fiscal year 24 proposed budget includes new debt in the amount of $1.9 million for the courthouse expansion. Project is estimated to cost approximately $40.5 million, and the construction is anticipated to begin in fiscal year 24. Given the interest rate on this project, the true cost of the debt service will be approximately $65 million over a term of 20 years. And the county has worked diligently to create a long-term forecast, which also Nick spoke to, that analyzes available funds for the courthouse expansion. This is a momentary forecast. You know, things could change definitely. But the forecast was presented a month ago. It's located in your handout folders. It will also be partially integrated in your fiscal entities presentation tomorrow. As of now, that forecast does not project that the current county revenue will be enough, will have enough available funds to meet the debt service obligation. Many of the budget decisions you will consider this week as a body will focus on allocating resources to fund paying down the debt service related to courthouse expansion and preserving current service operational levels. This conversation will be addressed in more depth during the fiscal entities presentation tomorrow, and also on Thursday when we'll be going through all those budget decisions. More information on debt can be found on page 14 of the budget book. Actuals history can be found on page 39. All right, so now I'm going to go into just a little bit on the special request and the budget details or budget decisions in a little bit more detail, and then we'll pass it off. So as in the past years, the budget officer, Nick Lilac, has included some special requests within the proposed budget. I would ask you to turn to the last tab in your budget binder here. Special request tab. Or second to last tab, excuse me, special request tab. Thank you. For a quick review of these requests, the majority of these requests included in the budget are long-term supported by departmental funding. That means the department is not asking for additional general funds to support the request. Positions that were included in the proposed budget and that have general fund costs have been deemed necessary by the county administrator for the continued functioning of service levels. As a policy decision, special requests of elected officials have been left out of the proposed budget. The committee will deliberate on special requests during Thursday's budget session. And of course, the committee has the authority to pull out anything from the proposed budget as well. So now I'm going to move on to general fund, kind of the discretionary funding decision points. These are the big decision points. As mentioned earlier, the general fund and its revenue streams not only support our internal departments, but also support the operations of the entire county. And with board approval, can also transfer funds to any department that may be facing financial need. The general fund has historically been the primary funder of capital maintenance and capital expansion needs too. Due to the fiscal responsibilities placed on the general fund, the stability and health of the fund is critical to maintaining current service levels and capital needs throughout the county. In FY 23 and projected into fiscal year 24, the general fund is expected to continue to face increased inflationary pressures and reduced available resources. In tandem with these current short-term pressures, the county's long-term financial forecast showed that at the historical rate of actual expenditures and FTE growth, even with levying the full tax being imposed in this fiscal year, the general fund would no longer be able to support itself by fiscal year 33. Due to the short and long-term pressures on the general fund and county operations, and keeping in mind anticipated courthouse expansion costs, which will need to be at least partially funded by some general fund dollars, the Budget Committee will have several budget decisions focused on the allocation of funds to reduce or alleviate pressures on the general fund while maintaining current service levels. One of those decisions will be voting on potentially increasing the tax levy to the full rate of $1.2783 per $1,000 of assessed value. This would increase resources by a projected $1.8 million in property taxes within the general fund. The general fund and its fiscal stability will be discussed in more depth tomorrow as well. Other budgetary decisions primarily focus on allocation of available funds to immediately pay down the courthouse costs to lower future debt service payments and save funds at a rate of approximately $600,000 per $1 million of paydown. These decisions include allocating $8 million of the general reserve to courthouse buydown. The general reserve currently contains in totality around $9 million. If it was also voted on to increase the tax levy, it would be approximately $10.2 million, which isn't the full 1.8 because we'd have to leave some of that in contingency as we increase our property tax rate, 33%. Another decision would be to allocate 4.6 million of the local assistance tribal consistency ARPA funds. Those have general discretion. They are not quite the same as the American Rescue Plan state local fiscal recovery funds, and approximately 320,000 also in general ARPA interest to pay down the courthouse project. Allocating unspent and return general ARPA balance to internal costs to alleviate some pressure on general fund for operations or courthouse pay down. Allocating projected unspent fiscal year 24 funds estimated at 720,000 to buy down the courthouse debt, and transfer of approximately $2 million, which was previously transferred to project management from the general reserve for the purpose of buying down the courthouse debt. And those funds were transferred a few years back, and they would typically be used for kind of mid-year purchase of land and buildings if the board wanted to make a decision on that. Again, they did come from the general fund. This decision would move them back into the general reserve to pay down court service. Also, another decision would be transferring any unbudgeted payment in lieu of taxes, estimated around $800,000 from the county road to general reserve, and transfer unallocated 30% of 1% of transient room tax to the general reserve. And that is estimated at about $460,000. Those funds usually go to the Fair and Expo Reserve as they have capital needs that they will need to and capital maintenance needs that they'll need to do as their facilities are over 20 years old at this point. And so those are all going to be great conversations, but a more detailed conversation of each one of these decision points will occur during tomorrow's presentation, the fiscal entities presentation, as well as during some of the operational presentations that may affect this. If you have questions for, road or for the Fair and Expo as well, when they present later on. The sheriff's office will also have several decisions. The sheriff's office is funded through 2 voter-approved law enforcement districts that levy property taxes. The county district with the maximum tax rate of $1.25 per $1,000 of assessed value supports countywide sheriff functions, including the jail. The rural district with a maximum tax rate of $1.55 per $1,000 of assessed value supports unincorporated county sheriff services such as patrol and investigations. The proposed budget includes levying the full tax rate in both districts, which is an increase of 20 cents per $1,000 of assessed value in the countywide district and an increase of 12 cents per $1,000 of assessed value in the rural district. The full levy is needed to support operations at the current service level and for future public safety campus expansion. The sheriff's presentation will go into more detail on the necessity and use of this levy increase. The budget committee will need to vote to approve this proposed tax rate. It is in the proposed budget right now. And also the sheriff is requesting $500,000 of additional transient room tax funds over the proposed amount of roughly $3.65 million for ongoing operations. The sheriff's office will also speak to this request in their presentation. Invite you obviously to ask as many questions as you may have, and this will be a budget committee decision during Thursday's budget session. Other budget decisions may naturally come up during the course of the budget week presentations, and these will be recorded and compiled by the budget team for deliberation on Thursday. And I just want to thank everyone as well, specifically Cam Sparks, who both of the books were done by Cam Sparks and Laura Skundrick, budget contact for multiple funds. Nick as the proposed or as the budget officer, and Whitney and Eric for communications, Robert, who it may be your first season, but you understand a lot. And I really appreciate your support and guidance as we go through this process. It's meant a lot. And then of course, as everybody spoke to, Megan, Brenda and Angie up there, and Eric Rion, and without them, these things wouldn't be possible. So just want to thank everyone.
Thank you, Dan. Well done. Any questions for Dan at this point? All right, we do have a few minutes. I'd like to open it up for any other comments or ideas that you have going forward this week.
I'd like to thank Nick and all of the county staff for having reviews of some of the departments like Health Services and VCO. I think Visit Central Oregon Board and the other ones that we've had prior to meeting. I think it's very helpful for the citizen portion of the budget committee to hear those with the week prior. So I want to thank you for that. It was helpful. And I think it helps save time on this end. So thank you for doing that.
And I want to thank the precedent established way before I got here, that this is so incredible. And maybe it's why our rating is so good, Robert. But we spent a lot of time doing this, and I never think it's a wasted moment. I think it's so important. Stay on top of things and do what we can. We have so much uncertainty currently fiscally. And then of course, we've got a month to wait to see what happens with our courthouse funding. But what we know we can deal with, and being incredibly conservative, I do think is the way to go right at the moment. So thank you. And thanks for taking all this time, and thank you for moving it the week before the weekend, the 3-day weekend, right?
I'll add in, I think this is an incredibly thorough budget preparation and presentation. And you've helped with my weightlifting skills for sure. We were talking about that earlier, but it makes it easier as somebody who's not immersed in the daily details to actually get this thorough presentation. And I certainly thank the county for providing that.
Yes.
Couple big picture thoughts. I kind of think of before COVID, we were on kind of a 10-year run of just growth. Just managed growth. It was comfortable growth. It was growth in the assessed value. As I say, worldwide pandemic, federal investments, and just a lot of moving parts all of a sudden. So as a big thank you for having such professionalism and putting this budget together. The world is very dynamic now. Obviously, interest rates and inflation. It's just coming and going. It's just amazing right now. We've seen our county budget grow 300 something million to 500 to 700. I mean, these big numbers, it's just managing growth. Just a couple days ago, cars are on the road, so we'll see what the summer looks like. Commissioner Dare said, yeah, maybe we'll have a robust summer for transient room tax, what I'm referring to. But just there are people everywhere all of a sudden already. We've seen a change in people that intended on maybe moving to a more rural area out of the big city. It's happened. The COVID pandemic triggered people to just live differently. So we're seeing that on the ground also. Doing our planning, comprehensive plan, transportation system plan, what we are taking time to look at the next 10 years also. it's really good to be able to be in a comfortable enough spot to think about, okay, what does tomorrow look like? And as I say, I really appreciate that community development, big effort around the county right now, getting people's thoughts on paper, and transportation improvements. We're known for being able to invest in our transportation system, the county roads, and then partner. We write checks to our ODOT partners and those intersections where it goes from a state road to the county road or county road to the city road. We're there with resources. So that's really a great spot to be also. Today, we are going to go hear from RTR Economics, and I'm excited about this. And as I was saying, Jim, yesterday, I mean, our tone and mood might be different this afternoon because this is national and international economic outlook. And I'm really looking forward to hearing the message that we hear today. So it's really good that we're able to take time and do that. The health fund was mentioned. It's really interesting because it's been awkward that the reserves went up and up a few times, and then we're trying to dial it back down. And now it's just the other way. It's a great system we have for all the covered lives of the program that we have, the employees plus their family. But yeah, it's just amazing watching the health costs go up so much also. A couple months ago, I support raising our tax rate, our 6 cents tax rate. I know we were at a split vote last year. I'm just letting you know, just because of all that dynamics, it's time to put that in place and move forward with those resources. So just for clarity up front.
I do have a question. What are we assuming the tax rate collection will be? Normally I've been on the Sisters Park and Rec Board, and they always had a number from you all that said like 94% collection, but what number are we assuming this year?
96%.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, we're assuming that the collection, even in uncertain times, remains similar to the assessed value, though we have dropping below the historical rate. Mhm.
Thanks.
I guess what I'd say is that we are at a critical moment where we need to demonstrate good planning and good foresight. I'm frankly pretty shocked at the assessed rate proposed increases at the sheriff's office this year, and I'm going to have a lot of questions about how we didn't see that coming when we were doing rate reductions in the last few years over at the sheriff's office. And it's I believe it's kind of a cautionary tale for all of us that if we we know that our property tax base is growing. We know that real values, market values are so much higher than assessed values that is going to grow. I mean, but we need to understand that that only does so much for us, and we need to live within our means, and we need to understand that drawing down all of these pots of money that we have had because of really good fiscal management of the county over the last couple of decades, that we can only do that for so long. So I hope that we will demonstrate good planning and foresight and fiscal responsibility as we move forward with decision making about this fiscal year.
I think that's what we have planned so far. We're up to that recess point a little early. Is it our will to recess at this point? All right, we'll take our break and reconvene at 2 p.m.
Are you asking if you want to do the budget?
If you wanted to do BOCC, yeah, early.